So let's look ahead to the future of agriculture. Look at some bright spots, maybe. The first one I want to talk about here is protein consumption and demand. As I mentioned earlier, domestic demand for protein continues to be strong, both in the pork and beef markets. We're seeing packer margins at near record levels. They're making a lot of money, which of course doesn't always get trickled down to the producer, but I think that that shows a positive. They're showing that they want the cattle. They want to continue slaughtering cattle. Slaughter numbers and harvest numbers have been continuing to keep pace. They need the beef. They want the beef. We want the beef in the US. We want beef internationally. But for 2019, we're expected to see pork and chicken meat trade strengthen, while we're expecting to see beef trade slacken a little bit. And not a whole lot. We're still going to be at that neutral level. We're not going to see a drop in exports. But that is something to consider. However, when we look at supplies, we see ample global supplies to support record beef exports in 2019. So if we do see exports continue to keep up, to continue to be strong, we've got the supplies there. Cold storage is at record levels, at near capacity in many instances. We've got the beef out there, and we want to keep sending it. So can we send it? That's the question. Who's going to take it? This is an interesting chart as you look at demand developing for pork, for chicken, for beef worldwide. And I have this written at the top. Rising income levels equal rising middle class. That's pretty basic, right? We see rising income levels in economies. We see rising economies. We see economies strengthening in some underdeveloped part of the countries. Then we see a rising middle class. With the rising middle class, we see more people turning to higher sources of protein. You'll see that right here, just in this chart alone. 2010 to 2012, those lighter colored chunks there on the bar, compared to the darker chunks, are the expectations or projections for the year 2022, just 3 short years away. Looking across the world here at some of the markets that are expected to see some of the most growth: Brazil, South Africa, India, China, Russia. Expecting to see lots of growth into 2022 for meat consumption. Then when we look at meat consumption that's already happening and growth that we've already seen happen firsthand, especially when we look at Southeast Asia, let's look at China in particular. From the year of 2000 to 2016, we saw a 42% increase in meat consumption per capita in China, a 42% increase. A lot of that is due to their rising and growing population, but it's also due to that rising middle class in China that wants access to a higher quality protein. And who has the safest, most reliable food source in the world? The United States. Then as we look at up in other coming markets, Africa is a big one right now, especially South Africa. They've been in the news time and time again. Over the past couple of weeks, I've really noticed that South Africa has been in the news because of their corn production, their oil production. They're an up-and-coming country. They're ready to start competing in a world market. If you look at forecasted middle growth throughout 2014 to 2024, we see Asia Pacific, which are largely these countries coming online fast between those years. But then the second one there, Sub-Saharan Africa, that's the next one. That's the next biggest chunk of people that we're expecting to see about 100% growth in forecasted middle class between the years of 2014 and 2024. And with the rising middle class becomes people who have more money to spend on food and services and goods. This is a quick breakdown here of Sub-Saharan African exports. In the year of 2014, that was the freshest data I could find. In that year, 2014, we exported about $2.3 billion in ag exports to Sub-Saharan Africa. And that number is going to continue to grow as we see the middle class grow. However, I want to put in one quick disclaimer here, and that's back in reference to China. I didn't mention this earlier because I wanted to wait till we got to discussing Africa, but China is investing money, they're investing infrastructure, time, etc., into a lot of other economies, into Brazil and into sub-Saharan Africa. There's this movement called the Belts and Roads Initiative that China is starting. They're building railways and systems to export product back and forth between the EU through Africa into China so that they have other measures and other countries to rely on than just the United States. They are COE, commander of everything. They're looking ahead at the future so that when trade relationships get damaged, like they are right now with the US, they have other places to look for trade to get those products that they need.